Hello, and welcome to this episode of Windowcast and Glasscast from the National Glass Association. I'm Laurie Cowan, editor of Window and Door. I'm joined today by Tony Davis, National Director of FAME USA at the Manufacturing Institute. Tony has led the expansion of employer-driven training network of 45 chapters in 17 states, supporting nearly 500 manufacturers and helping thousands of students launch careers in modern manufacturing. Tony, welcome.
Thank you.
Could you just start off with an overview this morning of some of your background of how you got into this role and what FAME USA is?
Sure. I think we have to go back a number of years to kind of lead into this particular role today, but it was approximately 10 years ago. I was leading an economic development organization in central Louisiana, where I would have an annual event to talk about an important topic of the day with a group of manufacturers from central and northwest Louisiana. And brought in a guest speaker who introduced the topic of fame to us, which was a relatively new thing that was growing in Kentucky at the time. And by the time that speaker was through, and I was talking to the employers in the room, everyone had said, this is something that we should be doing. We definitely need this as a solution set. And that was great, except there was really no playbook for what that meant. There was no real guidance for how we could do that. But I've been working with a number of other programs. I had a background in working in state education policy, had been 2 terms on the Board of Education in Louisiana. Um, Plenty of work around site development and attracting new employers, and lots of work trying to keep my employers. And so as a solution set, I thought this is great. I need to pursue this. But again, there was really no guidance for it. But we began to do so, move forward, and ultimately create a FAME chapter in Louisiana. And that was important because that sort of set off a series of events that, as awareness of the program grew in other parts of the country, ultimately led to a discussion that moved this program over to the Manufacturing Institute. And ultimately, in doing so, they needed to bring someone on board to help expand a program like this. And I was fortunate to be chosen in February of 2020 to join the Manufacturing Institute and help lead the expansion of what is now known as FAME and FAME USA. And so it was that background working with a local solution at the time that became part of something much larger that helped bring me to this role here at the Manufacturing Institute. And it's just been tremendous at that point. So we took over a few chapters across a few states. And we have been finessing this model, continuously improving upon it, working on how we can scale, deploy, and support it since that time. And I've got a small team here at the MI that supports this work as FAME USA. It's a great adventure every day, and it's just it's gratifying and it's validating to be able to address some of these major issues that we have around workforce with this really great solution, and to see this thing continuously expand every day.
Can you talk about the current state of the workforce in manufacturing and why this is such an important topic right now?
Sure, that's we could talk for a long time about something like that. You think about just where we sit today with 400,000 unfilled jobs across the country in manufacturing, and that is bad, right? I mean, we talk about it all the time. We need more people in manufacturing. End of story. We can dig a lot deeper into different areas, but at the end of the day, we need more people working in our manufacturing sector every single day. And as we look forward, think about what this looks like as we move into the future. We're going to see a lot more people that we need in manufacturing. And the really, I guess, alarm bell that rings here is we look forward to 2033, nearly 4 million jobs are projected in manufacturing. But about half of those are also projected to go unfilled. And so that is a really dire situation. Not only do we need people in manufacturing today, but all of our numbers tell us we're going to need so many more and are not doing the things necessary all the time to help make sure all those roles get filled as we move forward. We think about that in manufacturing, for example, the median age is older than the overall private sector in the US. So we have an aging workforce here, a lot of planned retirements coming up, the perception gap that we have to overcome. In short, what is the average 16-year-old in a high school right now think about manufacturing? Do they think about manufacturing? So these are really important aspects of the work that we have to address every single day for this very important sector of our economy.
Mhm. We're seeing a cultural shift around alternatives to four-year degrees. How do you make the case to students and parents, like that 16-year-old you just referenced in high school,
Mhm.
that manufacturing careers are a viable path?
Oh, well, we just that actually, that's where we start. To your point, it is a viable path. We see that, and we do see that shift. I think that's great. I love that you call that out because frankly, that's a relatively new shift. We could go back to sort of the stereotype of forever. We've had the college for all kind of mentality in it, not forever, obviously, but for decades. but it's a very real, very perceptible change that we're seeing now. And so we are making the case. Not only how would we make the case, but to be clear, we are making the case now. And we're noting that training is needed because this model is shifting and that the traditional path is not always the path that is appropriate for what the needs are in manufacturing today. When you think about the FAME AMT program, for example, this is a degreed apprenticeship. Students are leaving this program with an associate degree. And it's an argument to be made. We have this talk a lot of times with students that, an associate degree is not less than, it's just faster than. This is a way to validate knowledge, to really build in some critical skills that we need. And oftentimes it is the first degree, not the only degree. And so this different pathway is an opportunity that we try to elaborate for students who may be interested in this, that here's an opportunity to, whether it's in FAME or just in manufacturing, but this is an opportunity to gain more skills, to get a good paying job, to have opportunities for advancement, to really help secure jobs that are built for the future. What we're doing in manufacturing is forward facing. We're bringing in more technologies, more and better, more efficient processes. We're integrating things that we've not thought about in the past, the robotics levels that are involved here, the automations that are involved. So when we have this conversation with potential, let's say students, again, to your point, that 16-year-old, we say, do you know what we do? Let me show you what we do. When you can see it with your own eyes, it is really breathtaking to see what happens in a modern manufacturing facility. And then we can follow that up and say, you have lots of options in your choice of how you pursue this kind of pathway, right? That what you may have thought was a binary decision or college or not, et cetera, is not necessarily the case. There are ways that you can pursue different types of training, different skills development, whether it's apprenticeships or otherwise, to move into these great roles.
Mhm. Can you describe the FAME model and how it merges the apprenticeship and the hands-on approach plus the educational and the degree approach?
Absolutely. So when we think about FAME, I think it's really important to think about it as a model for skills development, and really, I would submit the best model for skills development here. We focus on three things that are so important for today's manufacturing, but also preparing for tomorrow, and that is technical skills and lean elements to really build critical thinkers, analytical thinkers, as well as professional development there to help build the person as a whole. So we engage in that in apprenticeship style delivery. That's 3 days working and 2 days going to the college campus. Students who go through this program will work thousands of hours across the town, build all that work, hands-on experience, but they're also in that work experience with their academic development. So they're earning an associate degree, they're getting a really broad set of skills that includes mechanical, electrical, and fluid power, and pneumatics, and PLCs, and HMIs. And back to those 16-year-olds earlier that don't know what PLCs and HMIs are. We can work with them to help them understand how that ties into what they think is a really neat job and say it is a really neat job. And these are the skills you need for these kind of jobs. And so they're earning this associate degree. They're getting all these hands-on hours of work. And in our program, they're demonstrating mastery of these really important professional behaviors developments that we're putting them through, help them to learn how to carry themselves well, to show up on time, to be there all day, responsibility, diligence, teamwork, communication, the ability to present effectively, making eye contact. Those are all important skills we develop, as well as those lean elements of the program. And the lean elements really also help set apart the development of individuals in this program when they can demonstrate mastery of safety culture. They can move into visual workplace organization and deep dives into lean, the principles of that, problem solving, machine reliability. These are all super important skills, and they're all developed through this earn and learn model that is the FAME AMT program.
Mhm. Okay. Now, on the window and door and the glass side, we have a lot of very small companies, and then we have mid-range companies and then larger companies, but every single one seems to be facing the similar challenge of the workforce shortage. How can employees of various sizes scale, whether it be this model or a similar model, to try to expand their own workforce and encourage the trades and manufacturing in their areas?
Yeah, so there's several things there, and I'll start with the FAME model as a way that we know is a proven resource for this. With the FAME model, we build collaboratives of employers who work together. So this skill set that we're describing that is so in need, this critical role for an advanced maintenance technician, someone who can keep the machines running, get it back up and running when it breaks. This role requires a skill set that includes a keyboard and a wrench, if you will, right? So it's a really well-rounded and deep set of knowledge. Very important. But because it's very important, because it's a deep set of knowledge, it also is intensive to build that kind of training, right? And so the FAME AMT program can do that. Importantly, to your point of small and mid-sized companies, those companies may not have the resources or the need for that matter, right? They may not have a scale. They don't need 20 people skilled this way, but they may need one or two. but those one or two people that they need are integral to their operations, right? They're so important. And so where it's been prohibitive in the past to get that level of training for one or two or a small number of employees, now as part of a FAME chapter, your demand of one or two, whatever that number may look like, can sit right next to an employer who needs 10 every year or 15 individuals trained this way. And together you form a class. And that is a great way to be able to get access to this really high level of training to build the skills that you need. Again, for small employers particularly, having someone on their team with this set of skills could be the difference in gaining a contract or losing a contract, right? Meeting those deadlines or not meeting those deadlines. And what were their options before? It was very, very limited, if at all feasible. Now, through a FAME chapter and collaboration with other employers of all sizes, now this is an opportunity that's really accessible. So we love that about the model, that it brings that opportunity together. But even more so, once you build this collaborative of employers who are working together, who begin to build trust with each other, again, they're competing in other ways, and that's okay. But in this sense, they recognize the need and the opportunity that working together presents to them for filling these really critical roles. But now, as a collaborative, what can you do to build awareness of these jobs in your community? You're so much more powerful as a group of employers, so much more visible as a FAME chapter or these names. Some are household, some are not, but all are part of this effort. You think about, for example, the MI's program, MFG Day, Manufacturing Day. Great opportunity to build awareness. We love that. And the power of collaborating amongst 10 employers to put on a really large showing and open your facilities for that is so much more effective, if you will, than having a really small employer who's trying to figure out how do I even set someone aside to lead a tour of my facility. I need everyone, all hands on deck, right? I don't know who to talk to the schools to even coordinate or whatever. But again, through having this collaborative that we build in the FAME chapter through our executable model there, it really gives these employers an opportunity to work with others and really build a synergy for what they wanted to see done, but maybe didn't have the resources to do before. Now they can start doing those things.
What skills do you think will be the most valuable in the next 5 to 10 years in manufacturing?
Oh, well, there's a lot of thought in that one. At the end of the day, we can think about how we train individuals today for jobs tomorrow. There's so much we don't know about some of the jobs for tomorrow. And so the first thing I'll tell you is adaptability is really important. And so there's a level and a need for foundational skills that help make sure that we are able to be prepared and embrace the change that we know is inevitable and that's already happening around us, right? So when we think about the curriculum and the model around FAME, when we're developing these technicians to program like this, if you look at the cumulative effect of the professional behaviors and the lean elements of the program and the fact that you're earning a degree and the levels of work that go into that and the validation of that degree in hand and the transcript in hand, the cumulative effect is you end up building lifelong learners. You're building individuals who are familiar with academic rigor. They're comfortable with that. They've moved through that. They're comfortable moving further into that if they need to lean into new skills in the future. The lean elements bring in problem solving and critical thinking, analytical skills. The academic basis brings in, programming levels and robotics integrations and things that are foundational for adapting to and embracing this next level of automation as it comes through. Their next level skills included, the big word, the thing we haven't said in this conversation, but AI, right? We think about what's that look like? Well, how you and I might use AI for, I don't know, planning a vacation or getting some quick references is one thing, but how does a shop floor technician use AI to contextualize troubleshooting in front of them or converting SOPs for safety between different types of equipment? That's a skill that we want to build into this and make sure that's evident for these technicians because again, it's not about defining what the job is tomorrow or next month or next year. It's about recognizing the skills needed that we can train today to allow these individuals to adapt and adjust and move forward into that. Again, a big part of that is building a lifelong learner, someone who recognizes that this job is not over with. My training is part of the everyday adaptability of what I do. I'll have new equipment that comes in. I've got to learn that, right? There'll be new products that our facility brings on board, and we have to create the processes to produce those products. Excellent. We're used to that sort of adaptability. We just extend that into there will be new concepts as well that we have to recognize, embrace, and train for appropriately.
Th- That automation and technology conversation is huge. It's certainly one that we have nearly every single day in our conversations. And I imagine it also serves as a type of recruitment tool or something that is appealing for younger folks looking to explore this as a career path because they expect to use technology in their everyday lives, whether it be at home or at work.
Absolutely. And that's the beauty of it is it's two edges to the same blade, I suppose, right? And the one side is we have a lot of individuals who don't know what we do in manufacturing, and we're working to overcome that. That's the perception gap. The other edge, though, is that once they see it, they go, wow, this is great. Like this is not what I thought it might be. But when we look at modern manufacturing and what it is today and where it's going, to your point, these individuals can do the things they already enjoy doing, they already want to do. Now they're learning they can apply that in manufacturing facilities.
Mhm. What policy changes would most accelerate workforce development and manufacturing? And to piggyback off of that question, where do you see the biggest disconnect between policy and reality?
Gotcha. So policy is a big part of this, right? There's been sort of a set of policies that have governed how we think about support for workforce development, mostly through USDOL, mostly through registered apprenticeship programs, or disjointed other efforts that may have been out there. So as we look forward, certainly we think that policy can play a big role in that. And I'll note that just recently, Gardner Carrick, who's the Chief Program Officer for the Manufacturing Institute, testified in front of the Senate Health Committee for a hearing on expanding registered apprenticeship opportunities and was able to share a lot of thoughts, some of which I'll share with you today, around our policy suggestions and guidance for that, because there are things we'd like to see change that really could help make this more feasible. And one of the things and several of the pieces are informed by the work that we do in FAME. You alluded to this earlier when we started the conversation, but FAME has now grown to a footprint of 17 states and 45 locations across that footprint, and it's growing continuously. Um, that means something. That means it's working. That means we can show our outcomes and that's coming together. And so we can learn from that. And things we've learned are that when employers are coming together and they're leading this discussion, that it becomes much more effective. When they are participating in designing the program, when they are helping to deliver the actual training, when it can reflect their needs in real time, it's very, very powerful. How are we incentivizing that? That's the question. That's a policy change, right? When we think about how do we simplify and or even just make more consistent access to funding for employers, for particularly employer-led training solutions. Again, the example I gave earlier, if you've got small employers, what are their opportunities? How do they scale their needs, particularly against larger employers with much larger needs, more internal resources, more ability to gain external resources? Well, how do we right size that in a way that as employers come together, and they're leading their own initiatives, how do we make sure they have access to funding that can help support their overall efforts, right? There's a need to expand opportunities to support incumbent worker training. There's opportunities that are there. How do we help make sure that manufacturers can invest in their existing workforce, right? The emerging workforce is very important. We want to bring new people into manufacturing, but there are a lot of our associates, our team members who are already on the floor, who are giving us great results every day. We'd like to be able to invest more in those individuals to help move them along their career path as well. That's a really important part of this. As we continue to think about the learning, I mentioned earlier, there's lots of pathways. It's really not a binary decision about what are you going to do when you graduate high school, as it might have been presented in the past. As we continue to think about how we create a progression of opportunities, how do we help students to learn about manufacturing, to interact with manufacturers in the shop floor in different ways, to train for careers that they may not have been aware of before. There are systems that should be more aligned and more efficient for helping to open up these opportunities, these doors, and make sure that the systems to support that, K-12, for example, are able to access funds and guidance to do so. And ultimately, finding policy that aligns funding to the development and expansion of these employer-led programs, I think is really important. Again, bias from the FAME side, but we've seen the results of this. But one of the magical elements of FAME is that the employers are leading it. This is an employer-led program. Employers say, we have a need. This is a good solution. We want to take this and move forward with that. And right now, our policy structure is not one that really rewards or incentivizes that sort of collaboration. Yet we know that kind of collaboration is creating some really successful outcomes in different parts of this country. how do we make sure we can provide more incentives to expand that as we go? Ultimately, there ought to be more recognition as well for credentials, industry credentials that show they have an impact on our workforce, that show the outcomes of training programs. Those can be very, very practical alternatives to existing outcomes as well. We want to think about how we can reward that or recognize those.
Mhm.
And I guess, you mentioned the disconnect. And I, I'm trying to think of the best way to think about how to, the biggest disconnect between policy and reality. Um, I think that in a broader sense, I would suggest that it's somewhere along the lines of thinking that there's one solution that's going to meet all of our expanding needs. That's a generic way of saying it, but the disconnect is that it's the sort of the old adage of if all you have is a hammer, everything is a nail. Um, and if from a policy standpoint, we are thinking that everything can be solved through one policy effort, one initiative, one driver, we're going to miss the boat because the sector is expanding, the needs are changing, the opportunities are in front of us, and we need to be able to adjust and support new models and innovative thinking and reward that innovative thinking and say, all right, we as a policymaker didn't think of this, or we have not used this in the past, but now we see it, and this should be a shift that we address to move forward.
Mm. It sounds like there are a lot of conversations happening, yet we still have quite a ways to go.
That's true. But to the point earlier, we talked about the shift in perceptions, right? And that's happening. And I think this is related to that. So yeah, lots of conversations, a long way to go. But the lots of conversation part of that is nice because we would have a further distance to cover if we weren't having the conversations already today.
Indeed. What gives you the most hope about the future of American manufacturing?
Hmm. The things we just talked about, actually. At this point, what we're seeing now that I think is just really um, it's important, but it's also telling, I think, as we look forward, is that we're seeing this shift in sort of accountability and that we want to make sure we in manufacturing, we need this workforce. We want to expand. We want to do more. We want to make more here. And workforce is a limiting factor right now. So rather than kind of sit back and say, well, what's going to happen next? We have a lot of manufacturers who are having these conversations. We're having these conversations. We have policymakers to the point we just made. They're having conversations saying, well, how can we do more? How do we support building our own in different ways? And obviously, apprenticeships are a great way of doing that, other programs as well. And so I think the hope comes from the fact that we have, I feel like, a very clear change in trajectory of this conversation at different levels. We have, high school kids, graduates that are looking at what is their next thing? What do they want to pursue? And they're looking at manufacturing more and more. They're looking at trades. They're thinking this is a viable path for us. That's great. They're doing that. We want more to think about that. As we have those conversations and we build more interest in these areas, having conversations with policymakers, with higher education, say, well, how can we adjust our systems? How do we address this sort of changing demand to make sure that we're preparing this future workforce in ways that are appropriate and different ways we do that? So having sort of this awareness shift, I think, is really great. I think, and that's awareness both in terms of graduating emerging workforce saying, what else could I be doing, or I'd like to move into manufacturing, but also manufacturers saying, we get it, we're going to have to take on a little bit more of this work, but let's get some good policy that supports that. Let's make sure we have some good partnerships that will support this work as well. And let's move in that direction. That's great. And as manufacturers, we're embracing the future. Again, as I said earlier, this is a highly automated field. It's becoming more automated every day. And I would say automation, to be clear, that just means we're using these skill sets that you talked about earlier. It just means that we're changing the skills that the people that need to do this work in our facilities, right? We still need the people, but their skill sets are shifting. And in this case, it's actually shifting in directions that people really want to learn these skills. They want to apply these skills. That's great because we have a place for you to apply those, right? So I think there's several things that are changing right now that are all positive in that sense. We have sort of a big task in front of us, but the conversations are happening. The perceptions are shifting in a good way. Systems are starting to evaluate, do they need to change a little bit? And I think these are all good signs.
Absolutely. Well, Tony, was there anything else that you thought was important to mention today for the glass and fenestration audience in the manufacturing world?
Um, some takeaways that I think they're important. Obviously, love to talk about fame anytime we can and share what we do there and how that can be a solution set. But the elements of fame, I think, are really important takeaways for everyone to consider. And some elements include thinking about how do we build career pathways, right? We talked about this a little bit in some of this conversation, but if we're starting to recruit for emerging workforce after folks have graduated, we're saying, all right, well, now what are you going to do? Well, I have an opportunity for you. That's not necessarily the best pipeline development, right? What are we doing to support our K-12 institutions? How are we building programs to build awareness of manufacturing, to be in the classrooms, to show what we're doing? Are we participating in Manufacturing Day? Those are really important elements of building that pathway. Thinking about how we work together. Again, that's something we really do a great job of here at the MI and through Fame USA of building these collaboratives, but knowing that there's a strength in working together, it's a really important aspect to think about. And then it's think about value proposition and culture. Culture is a big word. That's a big discussion, I realize too, but just being cognizant and realizing that every person who's in the workforce for the first time, every single day, they're going to look at what motivates them a little differently, right? What's going to move them into the future? What are the incentives for them? And I think as manufacturers, we have to just be aware that that's different, and it doesn't mean we make changes overnight. It doesn't mean we have to make all the changes, but it does mean we shouldn't ignore it. That we have to be cognizant of what this looks like to bring more people into manufacturing and keep them in these roles.
Wonderful. Well, Tony, thank you so much for your time today and for all of your insights and expertise. If somebody wants to learn more about Fame USA, where should they visit?
Let me have you go to www.fame-usa.com. Get a lot more information at fame-usa.com.
All right, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And thank you all for joining this episode of Glasscast and Windowcast from the National Glass Association. And please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel for all of our podcasts and other educational opportunities. I'm Laurie Cowan with Window and Door. Until next time.